Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope that you enjoyed your break, that you refresh yourself in many, many ways to keep yourself ready for the rest of the day, since we have still the very busy schedule for the afternoon and even for the evening. So now we are entering the second part of today's program, and it's my great pleasure and privilege to welcome here Bahar BEHBAHANI. And I'm very happy that she can join us. She's joining us from Brooklyn, actually. And just let me briefly, before I will give her a word, so let me just briefly introduce her. Bahar BEHBAHANI is a visual artist, originally coming from Oran and based in Brooklyn. Her research-based practice approaches landscape as a metaphor for politics and poetics. She looks into cultural landscapes both historically and in a contemporary context, posing urgent questions that consider the ways in which people negate and negotiate space and place. Her work has been featured in the Hood Museum of Art, Dartmouth College in the USA, the 11th Shanghai Biennale, the 7th Moscow Biennale, the 18th Biennale of Sydney, Shanghai Biennial 10, and the Drawing Center in New York, among many others. In 2019, BEHBAHANI was granted a Creative Capital Award for an upcoming project, Isfahan Flowers Only Once, which is a collaborative garden inspired by Persian garden design, philosophy, plants, and flora, which will bring people together to take part and reactivate unseen histories by gathering and gardening. So I'm very happy that Bahar is here with us to share more information and more experience from her, let's say, multimedia and very socially engaged and collective engaged practice. And then we will have also time for our discussion, and still we can draw upon the questions that Bahar kindly shared with us in advance. And I thank her for that as well. So Bahar, the floor is yours, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for this great introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be in this room, though just very far from you guys, but it seems like a pretty exciting program, and I'm looking forward to just brainstorm with you and go through like some conversations. Let me share my screen. Is that good? You can see?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
So I thought like maybe we start the session with a just one passage of reading. I wanted to, before getting into the project, just read a phrase in Toni Morrison's essay, The Site of Memory. You know, they straightened out the Mississippi River in places to make room for horse and livable acreage. Occasionally, the river floods these places. Floods is the word they use. But in fact, it's not flooding, it is remembering. Remembering where it used to be. All water has a perfect memory and is forever trying to get back to where it was. Writers are like that, remembering where we were, that valley we ran through, what the banks were like, the light that was there, and the route back to our original place. It is emotional memory, what the nerves and the skin remembers, as well as how it appeared. So the foundation of my talk today is based around these formal and personal patterns of concepts inspired and from Persian Gardens, as we heard a little bit in the introduction about it, that I've given myself over the years. It's a phenomenon that is so dynamic And it keeps changing as I keep learning, practicing, and thinking about the history of indigenous wisdom and their approach towards land, water, plants, and to each other, and how we can translate it to our current climate. So I thought to share this photo with you. It's a personal but also collective memory of water, weather, and land. This is a very special photo for me. In fact, it's always up on the wall in my studio. It makes me grounded. It keeps me connected with my ancestors. This is Shazde Garden, which literally means Prince Garden. It's in Kerman, a city in south of Iran, which is more arid area. It's built in 1830. And I just decided to write a paragraph about it, about my feelings, and just go through this journey together. These concentrated mass lush greens in the middle of nowhere brings me joy, the feeling of being protected. I can imagine people coming to shelter from the harsh sun here in the shade of trees, and who knows how far they come from. Were they commuters who stopped for a renewal? Were they average people from down the village? I think about the body movements around these plants and this temperature, walking along the row of tall cypresses or lying down on the shade of a fig tree, cooling down and listening to the breeze which moves the leaves of the birch trees. I close my eyes and I hear the nightingales are singing for the roses. I hear the sound of other birds and hum of other species. Sound of water. I close my eyes and I sense the heat on the skin, and hearing the soothing sound of the water already makes it a few degrees cooler. I imagine the invisible women, the builders, the engineers, the anonymous laborers, the sweats, the water they sip carefully, where the poetry and the plants are remedies, where the droughts was gracefully managed, the scarcity turned to abundance, where I come from and where my work is grounded in distance. With this introduction, in 2019, I got invited to the Wayfield Garden in the Bronx in New York City to make a site-responsive public art, where it's surrounded with water of Hudson River. Naturally, the first thing that captivates you is the mesmerizing view of Hudson River. You can't deny it. So it's a kind of a new landscape for me. My projects usually begins with a very meticulous solo walking. Walking is the way that I can feel the soil and the ground and contemplate better the subject with my own body. So I walked around 100 miles in the vicinity of New York City. Not in one day, of course. I started from the source, and the source is Croton Aqueduct. And one of the interesting facts is by the 1830, New York City had exhausted its own natural freshwater resources. The 300,000 citizens voted in 1834 to approve an expensive and daring project to bring pure and wholesome water to the city through an aqueduct 41 miles long that forever changing the fortune of the city that we live today. This again took me back to a story of water that I'm familiar with it, Shazde Garden in Kerman, and the journey of people for and about water. So I'm here in the Wayfield Garden and just wondering what I can make for this specific site as a person that it is from New York, but not from the Bronx. And I'm familiar with Hudson River because I'm a painter and because of the Hudson painting style, painting school. I'm contemplating Hudson River and trying to understand the story, above, underneath, along it. The site-specific work is a big responsibility for me. It talks about the history of the place, but also the community. So it always comes with initial nervousness. The Bronx nourishing from Hudson. The beauty of the river can't distract me from the erasure of indigenous people, Lenape people, plants, and the habitats exploitation. But what else do I know? So I turn my sight to the present and closer inside the garden, the neighborhood, the people, of course. Where the water comes and flows, I asked, and started from there. So I was curious about the underground water system within the garden and beyond. I knew that I wanted to take a further step and involve all the different communities within the ecosystem of the garden to the research process and eventually create the work on the spirit of a communal knowledge, which I call it communal research or communal knowledge. And I'm just interested to continue this conversation after the talk and the shared issues. I just go through the slides and this talk a little bit like as a hint, as an instigator for the actual talk that is between us and not just me monologuing. So please take them as just a guide for later exciting talk and conversation. For those who know me, I'm a big collaborator. I started my project with the thought that I have to turn to the community. I started with immense amount of walking with Wayfield staff, horticulturalists, gardeners, and the woodland ecology and water manager. And of course, the very open-minded curators who trusted me. In the course of 4 months, I had workshops and gatherings with interns and students. We had regular weekly meeting with the youth communities, which is called Art Community and Environmental Stewards, along with their leadership, and another active group in the woodland, which aptly called WERM, Woodland Ecology Research Mentorship. They are all like interns, and they are working around the forest project, issues like erosions and identifying the plants. Mostly they call it native plants, and they want to get rid of non-native plants. In the workshops, I asked them to continue ideas, research, art, and writing. We tapped into many subjects that I'm always interested to make the conversation around the plants more like a social history of plants and the political aspect of it. So these are these young people that they are super into their work, the ecological work, and then we're talking about the politics, we're talking about like, I asked them why the language around the horticultural history and text are so loaded, why we're calling non-native plants, for example, as invasive plants. And we had like all these conversations through many different media, sometimes just talks, sometimes reading, writing, and drawing and walking together. We walked around and talking about accessibility to water, green areas, and clean air within the Bronx area. I just wanted to know them and see where we can go with this work. I didn't have any clue. So I had to just grab something and just stick to it. I knew that it will show it itself to me. Gradually, from this, all the ecological, environmental skills that they had and these talks, we started sharing some memories around body of water, our families, grandmothers, our fears, our longings, the reflection on water and the spiritual weight of it. Very soon, I realized that everybody had a very special connection with body of water, but somewhere else, not necessarily Hudson. Joy, sorrow, anxiety, happiness, all these emotions got woven together where the community heard each other's journeys beyond the Hudson. From the sweet memory of swimming to the water pollution to the family story paddling across the borders. All of the sudden, talking about Mississippi, Euphrates, Ganges, and Rio Grande sounded deeply connected, essential, and empowering. So the result became a sound component of the main project as a sound installation, a place for reflection about the 8 contested rivers, the Hudson, the Rio Grande, the Karun, the Euphrates, the Ganges, Mississippi, Nile, and the Wouri. And the way that it worked, you were following the woodland path, you get to the rustic gazebo. The idea was actually experiencing the sound of each river by using your camera to activate the QR code. You could just listen to a sound that was the actual sound of the river of that region, and combined and my sound designer worked on it with some lullabies from the region. And you could just listen to it individually with your headphones or come in a group and listen to different of them at the same time. At some point when different people try to play the sound of different rivers, you could have like an orchestration of rivers around the world, either individually or collectively. Later on, during the installation, we used the gazebo also as a collaborative performative platform with inviting musicians, thinkers, researchers, activists, just people to come and activate the trace of water in the woodland. The performative music that I made, it was with collaboration with Maciek Szabel, who brought different improvisers to contribute to the work. And they made just this piece of music while we were all walking and following them. And it was like a public ritual for the water. We can actually hear, maybe watch the minute of this experience. Gazebo. Each sound comes with a QR code, and you can put your phone on and just listen to it. It's the actual sound of the river, but also some lullabies from the region. So this is a station for contemplating and meditation on these rivers.
Bundate, Afuri. Yo, 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 yeah. Bumitano, yo, 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 Bumitano,
We eventually kind of collectively decided for this focal point of the installation, which is an octagonal pool mounted on plastic barrels and slightly suggesting a floating raft to be used in the event of an emergency move to the river. There are many layers of this project that I feel like, again, I don't want to just have it as a monologue here. So I prefer just to show like some samples, and then we can just, if we would like later on, we just continue that, how it happened, why octagon, where the barrels came from, the ideas, how everybody just worked with the ideas, the other side projects, the zine making that they made, the community made from their own research around the work, and a little bit about the pool's interior that is surfaced with tiles sourced from construction projects. So I decided not to use any new tiles for this project. And so I just gathered some residue of other tiles from the construction projects in the city. And I also decided to work on the tiles in collaboration with a tiler from Ecuador, a migrant who's not yet legal. And we mostly improvised the design. And in addition to aesthetic, just the means of production is a great significance to me in the projects like this one, because it just really came out of my conversation with Cesar, the guy. And it's underscoring the time-consuming and intensive labor required to construct works in Thailand, works like this. That this labor has not always been voluntary, reflects a history of privilege and exploitation. So Cesar actually turned the project to a joyful and collaborative family affair, and all had a voice in the work. Again, later on, we can talk about the iconography of the work and the system of the underground, that how it's just changed the design of the work or influenced the work, the flora and fauna that people were just talking about it as the habitat of the place, of their own environment. When I translate these very intimate experiences to public art sharing with the Bronx community and people in New York, I can say the common thread is the same. here the issue of environmental justice and the Black and brown people. Here we're still struggling with water privatization, injustice, and migration is the seed of the history that has to get cultivated and get visible, but gracefully. I believe the ecological and environmental research starts with the personal understanding. In my opinion, the sense of belonging is a core of environmental justice. Later on, some ritual performative events was arranged with the community members who also continued to activate and maintain the installation through the fall and winter in the course of 7 months of the work. And the work survived in the winter of New York very well. So if you're not tired, let's just fly to Pakistan together. This is a work that I did for Lahore Biennale. Lahore Biennale Between the Sun and the Moon took place in January 2020, and it was until March, right before the pandemic hit the city, that I came out. It was like a magical moment of our life before that. It was curated by Hur Al-Qasemi, the director of the Sharjah Art Foundation. The exhibition focused on the global South, where ongoing social disaffection is being aggravated by climate change. And maybe here I read a paragraph from her statement on the Biennale to put the project in the context. Al-Qasemi said, for centuries, inhabitants of these regions oriented themselves with reference to the sun, the moon, and the constellations. How might we reflect on our place within the cosmos today at this conjuncture of planetary climate crisis and polarities between societies? Lahore Biennale looks upwards with a view to forging new responses and new imaginings of the future that encompass the full breadth of its material and virtual possibilities, growing from a tradition of intra-regional mobility of ideas, people, flora, and fauna. When I got invited to Pakistan to just research the initial trip, it was actually in the middle of my research process for the Wayfield project. And I was thinking about this interconnectedness of water issues, and particularly the rivers as the path of waterways that connect us in a very different context and culture and environment. While I was experiencing this work with the community in America, I was thinking how I can work in Lahore, in Pakistan, the country that I never been to. And it was my first time that I went there. So when I got invited to just actually look into the right site for my work, there were some designated sites for the Biennale, and I looked into all of them, and kind of like they were all like beautiful gardens and beautiful public places that they were dedicated to the Biennale, but something was not yet punching for me. So it was the last day that I was going back to America, and I had only like 4 days to see everything and just get the feeling and go back to America and just think about it and start my actual research. But I had to know where this work might want to be located, because it was again like a kind of like a site-specific feeling for me. But I couldn't connect to, not completely connect to the beautiful gardens that they are Mughal gardens that actually influenced by Persian Gardens. And it sounded like very apt for my project, but something was missing for me. And of course, in the spirit of working in the biennales, the community working is a little bit, like a lighter side. So I was walking, and it was last day, and in 2 hours I had flight back to New York, and I was a little bit, like debating, and so which site I should select. And all of a sudden I saw the sign of irrigation department of Punjab. And I was walking with my assistant from the Biennale, and I said, this is the main irrigation department from Lahore? And she said, yes. I said, can we go in? She said, why? Yeah, maybe, I'll ask. So we went in, and she, of course, like a little bit talked with the guard, and we went in, and I said, this is it. I want to work in irrigation department. And it sounded like a crazy idea, of course. It was a little bit insane, going to Pakistan and wants to just work in irrigation department and kind of collaborate with some sort of governmental place. But again, I was just so lucky with an amazing and brilliant curator like Hur Al-Qasemi, and also the manager of the director, another super brilliant fierce woman, that they just said, like, we try to make it happen. Let's see what happens. So from there, my journey of research started when I got back to New York City, that we can talk about, like how I researched a little bit later. But a little bit context about this project, that why I wanted to be in irrigation department, and the work title is I Can Drink Stars. And actually, this is what you see. It's a model of a study for Ravi River that flows the conflict between India and Pakistan to the point of water war in Kashmir. But this issue associated again with the colonial issue, it dates back to Indus Waters Treaty, which was signed in Pakistan in 1960 between India and Pakistan. The treaty gives control over the waters of the 3 eastern rivers, which Ravi River is one of them, to India. If the line of control, they call it LOC, between India and Pakistan in Kashmir, were to move from being a de facto to a recognized international border, India would permanently become the upper riparian and Pakistan the lower riparian of the Indus River and all of its tributaries. So again, I'm not going like to details, but we can talk about this in our conversation. But what I did for Lahore Biennale, that was the moment for me that I could expand my practice and challenge myself and others to see how we can collaborate together with water engineers, with fabricators, with average people, with gardeners, with workers, and it was definitely more challenging that maybe I was hoping for, and but like it was totally worth it, the experience. All forms of disciplines made really a magical moment that was fruit of working with the local water engineers, really local artisans, in the site of Punjab Irrigation Department. So the project directly and indirectly had to do with bureaucracy, hierarchy, transnational hydropolitics, and the collective care, resistance, and all in one path, a path of liberation, I call it. Again, I would like to talk about the iconography of these works and how we decided in a more non-authorship, and what was my role as a contemporary artist, how much vulnerable I was to accept and listen, and at the same time create something on the land that it is problematic, and I'm a guest there. It was a very interesting journey from the beginning of the sketch of the work to what happened at the end. It wasn't kind of the same, but I was welcoming. Many obstacles actually turned out again to make the work richer, and I embarrassed them. The demand from the community that they, at the beginning, they weren't involved or wasn't supposed to be involved, but like people just walked randomly to the site while we were working, and they were insisting to include some iconographies to the work, which was one of like my best experience that I can say, the learning experience that I had. And then the joy of like making the work with the community, but also like the anxiety of it, dealing with the government from one side, thinking about thinking within the frame of contemporary art because of the biennial, but how just overlap the kind of like respond to community as well, that they have nothing to do with contemporary art or the biennial. These pull and push emotions for me and for others, how we go with it, how we control it, in what extension. These are all like questions that it was interesting for me, and I had to go through it. I had the questions, but I didn't have actually the time to just really find the right solution. But the right solution, from my experience, had to go with like really trust the moment and the project and the people, and go with the flow. So later on, if we all are want to go deeper, we can talk about more things. But just to kind of like end this monologue, I'll show like 2 minutes of some sort of like documentation of how we made the work, and then from there we can just dive into our conversation.
Water came from here and exit from there to underground sump.
Okay.
Be careful. I want to know what's your favorite, because this work is your work. I want to know. Where is India? India की तरफ है. This is India. And so where India can or stop Ravi? Where?
ऐसा कुछ बना
For Kashmir?
कश्मीर
ये poem. He says that you can make a leaf for Kashmir.
ड्रामा ज़्यादा नहीं रोक दिया क्या बोला अच्छा हो गया
So,
Thank you, Bahar.
thank you for being patient.
Thank you for giving us the insight into your work. I think that we've even like in the early morning session when we introduced each other, then we started to talk actually about the practices, the best practices and challenges of us sharing our projects, no matter if they are like shows or books or whatever they are, with the larger public and how to make people engaged in our practice. So this is just perfect kind of follow-up, and it can also allow us to, in a way, continue in the discussion or to transform it somehow, to reconfigure it towards the realm of contemporary art, and which I do believe that all of us kind of work and are based in, or at least are familiar with. So I find it very well fitting. Thank you for that. And at this moment, even though you've shared some questions with us in advance, maybe I would use a moment and to ask anyone from our group, if you want to directly ask Bahar, I think that this is the best time. Yeah, so Pavel, please go ahead. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. I really enjoy it. Not only because my relations to water and the way I try to, let's say, narrate some power struggles around and through water and through film are like there are certain similarities connected to that. I had a question regarding the first image, this striking image, which is actually a World Heritage Site, as I discovered, the garden, which is hanging in your office, which grounds you somehow. And you told us about what I understood as kind of a, maybe the question is the grounding. Can you elaborate more on, why this kind of image grounds you? Because for me, it echoes many things, such as, the theory of half Earth, that the idea that the natural diversity can be protected given the current state of environmental destruction only by the fact that the humanity abandons half of the Earth, moves to the rest, and leaves the half of the planet to recover somehow. Or I relate it to the idea of privilege, or the idea of the idea of a national park as this protected zone, very pristine and beautiful, and very often connected with the idea of nation. And you know, there are those iconic plants, sometimes animals. We are clinging to national parks, right, as nation states. What does it mean to the rest of the nature? You know, it's disposable, or you know, we can treat it like a garbage, or you know, so there's this hierarchy put in place. And again, you know, in this image is striking greenery and striking, you know, barren land is just, it is a stream of ideas and associations. So can you elaborate on grounding? Are you connected with positive emotions, actually? Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. Actually, I just a little bit saw your fascinating work. So, and I love to know more about like your documentary and your experiences. So, thanks for the question. It's all like very interesting points, and they are true. One thing that I wanted to maybe just mention here about the idea of Persian gardens and how the Persian gardens became Persian gardens for the world is actually like the Europeans that they came to Persia, the ancient Persia, they just made like this very romantic idea of like oasis in the middle of nowhere, and they called it Persian Gardens. And for a decade, I actually worked on the travelogues and all these literature around like these travel books that the Europeans wrote, and the Orientalists that they tried just to explain and to put the Persian Garden on their own kind of cartography that they wanted to. They surveyed them. So it's a very problematic, not only term, but also like the way in which Americans, Westerners, and Europeans made it accessible to their world with their own definition. So the actual Persian Garden is based on very ecological and environmental notion, and as it looks and sounds that it's a garden in the middle of nowhere, and it's a privileged thing, that it might be. Some of the gardens, they are royal gardens, but the philosophy of the Persian Garden actually was completely within the urban designing of that time. Like none of the gardens were existed without giving the life to the villages. Actually, the purpose of the garden was the person that who could afford it, that usually was from royal family or the king or the patron, was the only person that could bring the water from the water engineering system that it's they say that it's the oldest water engineering in the world. It goes back to 3,000 years ago, that we called it qanat or cannot, and it's underground channels that is not like working like wells. It's like actually the horizontal way. It comes like miles of miles from the stream to get to somewhere that there is no water in a best way, that the water doesn't evaporate. And these qanats actually still working after 3,000 years. And the technique went to Spain, to Morocco, to Italy, and when these qanat just were made possible by this patronage way, and made the garden for so-called the pleasure of that royal family, but then the water continued because of that, and just went to the agriculture and to the village and to the people. So most of the Persian gardens are for the usage and for the practical way of making fruit tree and just giving to people. It's but the first thing and the most thing, it's like this exotic romantic idea. Yeah, so when I say it makes me grounded, I think about the resilience. I think about these people that I wish that we had time, or maybe in another workshop, if we talk about like the skill of making this kanat or these underwater channels. It's fascinating how these people, they had like a huge sacrifice, but also knowledge of where to put these wells, because we're talking about sometimes 50 miles, 100 kilometers of underground, going through sedimental things and knowing like what plants is underneath. Like, they were knowledgeable. And that also, the fact that we're coming from somewhere that is this scarcity of water, but then we are able to make that scarcity as an abundance. And you know, I always think about like how we can, what is dignity, how we can show the dignity of people. And to me, like, qanat making is a dignity of the knowledge holders, of ancestral knowledge, that really like makes me feel, okay, we come from there. Let's not forget and let's see where we can go with that. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's my feeling around that image.
I also have one question regarding your practice, actually in the both cases, and I'm happy that I can follow your practice even like or I have been following your practice even for a longer time. So these two projects I'm kind of familiar with, but I'm always thinking about the time, the way how you work, because it takes a lot of time. You really have to work with the community. You have to work with the space. You have to work with the history of the space, with the history of the community. You have to develop a lot of relationships, and it's a lot of communication. It's a lot of research. Then there is actually like a creative process, I think the manual one, and also a lot of communication within it involved. And later the presentation itself, and then you work with the projects, you revise them, you compare them, you follow on them. So then my question is, how do you deal with this contemporary issue of being still under the pressure of time? Because the way how we experience the time, we consume the time a lot. And even like in the field of research, in field of academia, in the field of visual arts, so a lot of emphasis being put on outcomes, and you have to deliver a lot in a very short span of time. So how you allow yourself to have enough of time?
It's a big question, I guess, and I wish like I could hear all of you that how you deal with time. But in terms of like community, yes, I think those of you that work within the community, you know that the trust is the most important thing. So, and trust needs time because this kind of like hard with a shortcut to get trust. So there are some strategies that if you sometimes I go if I don't have like time for a project, the time that I like, which is I'm like a very slow cooker, so I love just to have like time to do things, but I don't have that time. And some projects also like Lahore Biennale, although like the initial trip was 8 months before the actual execution, so in a way, I had 8 months to contemplate the project, read and study and connect with as much as people that I could in diaspora here, but also like with, through the virtual way. I was just trying desperately to just get the WhatsApp of the water engineer in the irrigation department in Punjab. Like it was just like insane, like the amount of the effort. And yes, if you put it in the box of today capitalist contemporary art or the way of living, it's not really, it's not logical to do all these things. But for me, I think the time also is not always linear. You can just create the time for yourself in some sort of like in a not like horizontal or vertical way, but just like in a multifaceted way. So it's more relative than just like, okay, I have like 2 weeks for this, or I have 2 hours for this. It's just the journey that I try to understand things. Is it dictates the definition of time. For example, sometimes maybe the very personal experience that I take, that I told you with like walking somewhere intensely, that might just takes like 2 days of insane walking from Brooklyn to Bronx to see the transformation of the neighborhood. But it's only 2 days, but it gives you actually the feeling of 2 years because of the things that you observe, the thinking, the isolation of that 2 days for dedicating for this walk. I think, yeah, I like to just hear from other people, but there are different ways that we approach research, getting familiar with something. When I don't have time to research deeply the way that I want, but I'm a little bit crazy, I'm nerd, I want to get PhD on all these things, so of course it can't be like that. I really turn to the community. I'm like, I'm here, let's do something. As simple as that. Then the time just gets like, like then you have like everyone in the project. I think the key is, that's why like I have like those questions that I sent to you, it's my questions too, because I'm constantly thinking about what means inclusive, what means democracy, what means the belonging, what means justice, what means accessibility. We have some definitions on surface and on paper and on the formality and all these, but like what exactly means a project feels a project that is not a contemporary art project, but the contemporary art ecosystem and world maybe makes it happen or makes the platform for it. But it's really, I like to think about like where this project goes, how long it lasts. Doesn't matter like if that sculpture stays there for 2 months or 3 months, but like what's the effect of it on other people. And other people, again, can be 3 people, can be like 300 people, but it has to be something that it considered to be as, I'm more and more getting to this like decentralizing the subjects, the agency of artists, and the contemporary art rules and formats. I feel like if we just really kind of like breaking through all these definitions, we can get to the gray areas that it's more creative and it's more room for conversation for everybody. I don't want just to talk, only I talk. So maybe
Yeah.
someone wants to jump in and just talk about, like, for example, here in America, they're like, oh, this work is accessible, but accessible to who and what it means? Is it like just because there is a wheelchair road is accessible, or what exactly we talk when we say accessible? What body we're talking about, and how much we think about these things as creators and as the people that we have a project, we have some sort of agency, right? We have power. They gave us a project to do, and I think it's a responsibility to include everybody. But like, how can we include everybody in one project? For example, in a, I don't know, a graphic design project, in a film, in a public project. Like, what is that mindset of including different being? Yeah, anybody wants to jump in to say something?
Yeah, there is a reaction by Agnieszka. So Agnieszka,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, I lower my hand. Okay. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. And I would like to jump into the discussion about accessibility and our presence, but maybe to connect it to the notion of the water you made, because I really like that idea, water as a social construct. And even like drawing upon the social geographer Jamie Linton and his notion of the old and the modern water, and what we consider as a water outside the social and ecological relations, or within, what would be the second one, more old water understanding. And if we translate it to the democracy and who could take part, what notion of water we have, and what the aesthetics of water we share, because that would be maybe also a bit a question in your for you, just before getting to that question of accessibility. Like what kind of aesthetics, according to you, of water are like present? Because also what we understand as water might differ from the other regions and the other traditions. So we might experience a bit of exclusion of other understanding what is water, and the wetness, for example, or the notion of river, or what we consider as river, might differ from the other regions. Monsoon river might be not attractive for us, and the same might be maybe translated into the public space. Also, what we understand as public, accessible, and give some notion. And yeah, I think it's a very metaphorical and needed way to discuss, and water and accessibility to the public, and what we consider as a public to be shared, to be within some social relation. And maybe to go to your question about the space and public space, what we consider mostly as a safe, inclusive space is something not to be discussed only within what is spatial and space, but always getting back for whom. So we never have a space at itself. It always function as a water within some social context. So that would be like, for now, input to discussion my side. I'm very curious about the reactions. Thank you.
So Bahar, would you
Anybody else
react?
want to add something to this? Thank you, Agnieszka. That was that's all like very interesting, and we can talk about all these like hours of hours. To me, is I think like we rely a lot on, for example, on the site, the experience of the site, which is very one-sided. So I'm trying in my work to see like how I can also like bring some other senses to the work. Definitely, we're talking about not the site, but like what we can do with only hearing the piece. If not hearing, what we can feel about being around it without hearing or seeing it, like how it's the speciality of that we go around it. What is the behavior of different bodies around something, regardless of the sight or smell or like sound? How can we make it like more immersive, or yeah, and just really like thinking about like the way in which we interact with the work is not always from our eye levels. we have to go like a lower level sometimes, and you know, like change our angles to see like how it feels. We just, so I think most of us, we are like in a very automatic gears, you know, like we just put it on this automatic way of like, okay, we see this way, this is the thing. It's, we just have to go a little bit dig in to underneath. And also I think it's great way to create something. It's asking. I always love to ask people, and it seems like it's a very simple thing, but not many people doing that. In many of my projects, so director of whatever invites me to do something in that institution, and they're like, yeah, just do like something that is also like a speak to the place. Okay, the history of the place is something, but the people that they are walking around that place is something else. And nobody consider to just very simply just run into someone in a hallway and say, how are you doing? How do you feel about this space? That's it. You're done with your research, I think, there. Just with the initiating to ask a simple question from a present person that is there, let alone to just make this to the expansion of like more people going around. But like we're like relying on books and text and historiography and categories and definitions a lot, but then we miss people around us, I think. I'm doing right now a project actually for a museum that is part of a university in Pennsylvania here. And it's about like native plants of the region. And there are like some big ideas. What was the native plants here? Who was like how the indigenous people like use these plants? What was it? everything is about like what is in the books. And I said, where are the students that they grew up here? Where are they? Can I meet them? So when you see them, they're just like really, like, these people are like young people. They have a lot of ideas that I think we don't give much of room for cultivating these ideas, you know. Like, we're just like, read this, bring this, we just give like orders. But like, I'm doing this project and I'm giving all the agency to the students to lead the research, do the research, lead the research, and make the connection about their research together, and make their own interpretation, not me, and then bring it to me, and then we discuss, and then we together we do this, because they have feelings of and anxieties about climates, about the plants, about the environment that they live, the non-binary way of being, that is just rare to just talk about it when you start a project and all these. So yeah, I don't know, we're just going somewhere else, but I think like, yes, I see a hand.
Yeah, there is a question by Magdalena, or comment.
Yeah, thank you, Bahar, and thanks also to Agnieszka for what they already mentioned. When I thought about what safe space means to me, that's something similar to what I thought of, the process. Because for me, safe space is a diverse space in which the common values and goals are not preset by dominant, even a slightly more dominant subgroup, but are created together in process. So that was just something I wanted to share.
Thank you for the comment, Magdalena. I also have to say that I was kind of touched by this kind of the strategy of empowering the others, providing them with a voice, because this was something also we were discussing, even though in the workshop when we were talking about some repetitive patterns through which refugees are seen and were seen in a history and are seen through them nowadays. And obviously this this question of who has the power to represent and to let the other speak, and if we are privileged to have this power, so how we can distribute it and how we can share it with others. So this is very important. I kind of just also thinking kind of out loud and saying how important it seems to be for all kind of the practices that we are now or today talking about. Being here as kind of agents to empower others, to help them to have the voice or to raise the voice, and to show them that it's possible. Because you were asking, Bahar, why people are not asking. Maybe they are not asking because they are not speaking, because someone has not provided them with the voice yet. So you can ask if you can articulate. So this is also a kind of a step which goes with it. So again, thinking out loud, more commenting than asking anything.
Yeah, I think it's also asking is it's a act of vulnerability. You know, you are vulnerable when you ask. It's a brave thing. It's not always you get the answer that you like, and then what you do. You know, it's a tricky thing. If you ask, you have to kind of like go with the aftermath of it. Yes, Julia.
Thank you. I had a comment that would like a bit on what Andrea said, but also that would connect it to the question about the space. So, well, I think that space to be inclusive must be safe, and that's very important. And you might look for it in like it might be understood differently, but it's also about asking. If you want to ask for help, you need to also, you can't be scared of the people that are around you. I'm of course now thinking about the refugee crisis here in Poland, and yeah, I know stories of people that like weren't able for hours to articulate what they want, not only because of the language barrier, but also because of how exhausted and also traumatized they are. So yeah, safety on different levels is also important here, I think. And well, that's all I can like stop here.
Yeah, thank you. And Natalie, you also wanted to share your thoughts.
Well, I wanted to ask a question as well, because I saw in the questions you raised beforehand about if we can consider migrant culture as a methodology in our current climate. And I was wondering if this also relates to, you said something about intra-regional mobility of ideas, people, flora and fauna, or I was just wondering what you mean with this migrant culture as a methodology.
Ooh. It's my favorite subject. Natalie, thanks for asking. It's a question, of course. I don't have like a complete answer for it. I'm just wondering if that can be a formulated or like a way that we can look into today and find some better solution to deal with climate, to deal with climate exile, to deal with anxiety of all these that we all like struggling with. And something that I practiced, and I have like a little bit like experience of that, to just to see like how I can translate it to my work as a contemporary artist. But I also don't like this contemporary artist title. I was talking with my sister the other day, and by the way, she's 10 years younger, but she's wiser. And she said, when we get rid of all these titles like multidisciplinary artists and interdisciplinary artists, what is that? Like, let's just like trash all of them and just find something else. And I agree with that. I was thinking about it and I was like, oh yeah, like, it's like, I want just to be what? I don't want to be a multidisciplinary artist. I want to be a collaborator. I want to be an instigator. I want to be a curious person. I want to be a facilitator. So anyway, with all that, I think all these is also, it's in part of it is in the migration culture. You know, when and how you make community. When you have to migrate from home, what you take with you, in what form and how, and is it safe or not, but also does it fulfill your emotions? And again, it goes back to dignity. Like when we wanted to make that raft, I was all the time thinking, we're thinking about a family that has got, it's not just a family abstract somewhere that we're talking about, that they have to move somewhere else. We shouldn't disregard all their cultures, rituals, values, precious things, sentimental objects, literature, everything that they carry with themselves has got a weight. How we can make a raft that they can gracefully migrate and paddle across the river. Nobody just really think about it, and I think that's kind of an ecology and environmental and political issue that we're just so like pragmatic that how should we just deal with the refugees somewhere? You have to understand that there is a dignity there, that we have to think about it. So how we can make this as a methodology of like working, that needs work.
Thank you for this, Bahar. A method, dignity as a methodology of work. I very much like it. That's something to remember. So I think that there is a space and time for the last comment or reaction. So I will ask Agnieszka, who raised the hand. So please go ahead.
So my comment is very short and it goes the direction dignity as methodology. Maybe it is also about our politics of listening. What kind of politics of listening we are able to develop in order, as Andrea said also before, like maybe they are not able to ask because they cannot speak. So how we can listen that somebody could feel safe to speak louder. And drawing upon the migrants, as we know, the someone who is searching for international protection, actually, he does not deliver an application. It's enough. He will say simply, I need help. I search for international protection. But the question is like, what are our politics of listening to hear that? And more generally also to create the public space and live with it. Yeah.
Bahar, would you like to react on that and then to conclude somehow?
Thank you, Olga, for just expanding the idea, but also I think it was something that Julia also like touched on that. I was thinking actually, Andrea, about like the work that I did in Czech Republic. When was it? I don't even know the time anymore, but maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Talking about like a safe place, I think it's one of those another problematic terms that it needs discussion. Like, is there any safe place, and who's making the safe place, and all these. But put aside those, I think one of the things that I did in Czech Republic was through this one of the rapid no time projects that I had to work with the community in a rural place in Czech Republic. And what I came up with, of course, I always think about like migration, and I was like, but it's not enough time to get the trust of the community here in the rural place to just talk about refugees and immigrants. And what I did, I made a tea party. And I just asked everybody to come. And among all the beautiful Czech women, the guests, we had a guest from Syria that she came, and we introduced rose tea, that it's a damask rose. And we indirectly talked about like how damask rose and this tea that we are drinking, and we were just casually talking and we were enjoying it. Then I asked that she just talked about damask rose for us. And then when she talked, everybody, I guess, was personally touched with the way that she talked about this rose and the where that she comes from and what it means for her and how they used it. And then it turned out that she was actually a scholar of literature in her own country, and it could just really diminished as an invisible or like something not worthy in that in that community. But all of a sudden we were all equal women in a tea party, and it was, who can say that was a contemporary art? Was not, in what extent? But it was I think it was a safe, close to a safe place for everybody, to just communicate, to start like a little bit communicating, you know. That's enough. We don't want to make like the safest place for the world. It's it's not gonna happen, but just to start.
So thank you so much, Bahar, for joining us today and for sharing your practice, for triggering more questions for us. But I suppose that the way how we are openly talking, and I do believe that we feel a kind of a safe place here in this group, so we can articulate more something that we are fighting with or dealing with and are insecure about, and this way of sharing of some, even somewhat smaller, somewhat bigger questions can lead us actually to at least not knowing that we are not alone in this, and obviously that the practice comes with some challenges, and it's how it is and it should be. And if we are more for sharing, then we can be braver, even, at least. Not smarter, but braver, and that's good also.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I'm just, I know that you all just brilliant-minded people. You're creating, you know, like a powerful work and effective work. And I think the key is like, just use your platform to bring more people in, and just see like how we can just collaborate. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and I will look forward to our future collaboration for sure. So have a nice day, and also feel free to join us tonight for next lecture. We will be happy. Yeah. Thank you, Bahar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
So thank you also, guys, for being here, for participating, and we will see each other for our last internal session of today, which will take place at 5:30. We will just talk, we will do some feedback on what we've experienced. Maybe we can catch up on some questions we were not able to discuss fully. We will see. When I was doing the preparation and the test with Bahar, we said just go with the flow. So let's go with the flow when we will meet at 5:30, and then there will be the evening lecture for us. So at this moment, just enjoy your break, and I will look forward to meeting you here again. So see you soon. Thank you.